Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Banjoverse. I'm your host, Enda Scahill. Today we have a very special guest called Jim Pankey, who's a brilliant five-string banjo teacher and player. He's a huge audience on YouTube. We've chatted back and over on Instagram. He's a fun guy and he has some incredible insights into teaching. Very inspiring conversation for me. I've really enjoyed it. I think you're going to enjoy it too. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so on Patreon. That's on Enda Scahill Banjo. The link will be in the notes of however you're watching this podcast. And if you want to learn banjo, Irish tenor banjo, you should definitely check out Patreon. I've got a ton of stuff up there at the moment. And if you want to learn five-string banjo, there's no better place to go than jimpanky.com. So I hope you enjoy this episode of Inside the Banjoverse. Jim, we've never spoken. I'm a big fan of you on YouTube. You're remarkably successful.
Oh,
when I say remarkably successful, it sounds like you shouldn't be successful. What's going on?
No, I totally agree. It's just like it was an accident and I didn't mean for it to happen. It just kind of happened it just kind of happened. I didn't have the slightest expectation of it doing anything. I like a lot of people with YouTube, like when it first happened, I saw the ukulele player, Jake Shimabukuro, his last name. Anyway, I saw Jake and he's playing this thing on the ukulele and I'm going, I could do that. Not on the uke, but on the banjo. So I started posting a few videos online and they did absolutely nothing. They get a handful of views and, folks that knew me watched them, but nobody was looking at them. They were getting no traction at all. And then, but I was gigging and playing and doing stuff all along, and I would post band stuff from time to time. And then, in 2011, I started, Greg Rich from Recording King reached out to me and it's like, hey, we'd like you to play one of our banjos. I want to put our A&R guy, Ashley, on you and, see if we can work something out. And so he sent me a banjo to play and it's like, okay, this is pretty cool. And so I started doing reviews. Like every 6 months, I would say, okay, I've been playing this banjo for 6 months. Here's what I've discovered in 6 months. And those started to take off. And then I had this dude local here, North Georgia, Keith. He reached out to me. He's a banjo player. He plays bluegrass, country stuff. And he's like, can you show me how to play Eastbound and Down, the Jerry Reed thing? I was like, yeah, I reckon. I said, come by the house because he lives here local. Come by the house and I'll show you. And he's like, nah, I'm not coming by. I'm too busy. Can you just make a video and send it to me? And so I thought, dude, if I'm making you a video, I'm let's stick it out on YouTube and see what happens with it, and that one started to get some traction. And I was like, well, that's kind of neat. And then, a few weeks later, he calls me up and says, hey, I want to learn this song. Can you throw me something out there for that? And it's like, sure, he's paying me, it's like, all right, it's the easiest lesson ever. I don't have to deal with you. And, we're just posting them online. And then, so he starts saying, and then other friends are like, you need to do like lessons. We like these. And it's like, I don't want to do lessons. There's lessons on YouTube. There's people out there. I'll just be adding to the noise. And everybody's like, yeah, but your lessons aren't out there. And it's like, well, I don't even know what I would do. How would I break that down? So I was real resistant and I just put, you get the thought in your head and you're just trying to figure out, is this really something that I want to do and how would I do it? And if I went about it. And so I just, one day it's like, okay, I'm just going to do this. So I shoot everything on my phone. And back then I had like an iPhone 5 and it's like, all right, so I propped it up on my music stand and just, and did the videos, and like those that I had started doing with Keith, I tried to put the whole banjo in the video where it was visible, and then you really didn't see my head. And then I feel like, well, if I got to talk to you, I got to lean in, and so all of that just came out of, that was just accident. I was just like, because those were originally just for Keith, and they weren't really public, and so I did those videos, and next thing you know, they took off, and then. I mean, they were, the subscriptions were growing. Everything was just, so that was in 2016 and 17. I don't remember, early 2017. And then by the end of 2019, I had like almost 40,000 subscribers. And then COVID hit, and so everybody was stuck at home, and then the channel just exploded. So, but the lessons they just kind of happened because I got strong armed into it by a few friends that were like, you need to do some lessons. And it's like, okay, I can create that. And the other motivation for doing it, I was doing private lessons at the time, and I had already met my monetization requirements on YouTube. And so as the monetization on YouTube grew enough that I could eliminate a student, it's like, hey, I could free up this hour of my day. I'll just depend on the YouTube income. And then it was like, oh, well, what a clever idea. So people would call me and say, hey, I want banjo lessons. And I was like, cool, we can do that. But here's what I want you to do. I've got 10 lessons out on YouTube. Go do the 10 lessons and then call me. And so I started just filtering my private students through the 10 lesson series. And next thing you know, I have no private lessons anymore. It's just all online. I don't even do one-on-one type of lessons. It's just, it just makes more sense for me to just, it just makes more sense to me because I don't have to commit a certain time every day for lessons,
Yeah.
I do offer some stuff like on my Patreon, my top tier, those folks get a 1 month or once a month checkup. They can say, hey, here's what I'm working on. What can I do to make it better? But I just, because this online lesson format, and I don't know if you do that, and if you do, you know how hard it is because, in real life, I can reach out and I can move your fingers, or we can play together, and then I can really hear where the timing issue is, where I might not catch it if I'm just listening to you, it just may blow past me. If we're playing together, I can certainly figure it out. So it's, so I don't even do just a very small handful of online lessons. And people ask me all the time. It's like, no, I don't do that. And the tier I've got on my Patreon for that is it's tiny and it's going to stay tiny. But anyway, that's the nutshell version.
Yeah.
That of kind of how that all got started.
So where did you grow up? Are you Georgia all your life?
Pretty much. Like dad did. We wound up in St. Pete, Florida for a little while. Dad did construction work and masonry work for different companies, and then we wound up back here in the early mid 70s, I think 74, when we wound up back here. And I mean, this feels like, and it sounds like home. I've been here long enough that, I definitely sound like I'm from North Georgia, but yeah, I kind of grew up here. And I mean, all of my musical experience is definitely from this area. I mean, I'm maybe 40, 45 minutes from Chattanooga. So like most of the music experience for me around here has always been around Chattanooga area because that's where, the population center is. So if you want to play, that's probably where it's going to be. So yeah,
Have you ever played the Barking Legs Theater in
a,
Chattanooga?
a number of times. Yeah. That's,
Yeah.
that's a key place, man.
Yeah, I've been. It's the only place I've played in Chattanooga. I've been there on a number of occasions. Yeah.
The barking. Well, yeah, if you're playing any sort of acoustic music, Barking Legs is where it's going to happen. They have the resources and the wherewithal to make that happen. And so it's a cool place. Good folks.
Yeah. Yeah. So was there music in your family? Did your mom or your dad play? Where did you pick up the banjo?
Dad played guitar, and he had a guitar and a mandolin, and but he started late in life. I was probably 3 or 4 years old when Dad started learning to play guitar. He had gone by, he bought a Western Auto guitar just like from a hardware store, and True Tone, and wound up teaching himself to play guitar. I guess the story as he tells it is he saw this guy in the store playing the guitar, and he's like, I can do that, So he bought a guitar, and he learned to play. So he played old country music and stuff like that. And then, his sisters, they sang, my aunts, and so that music was around. And then, of course, we always, if we listened to music, it was always country music, something like that. And he had like all the Hank Williams stuff, but he also had a handful of bluegrass albums and Flat and Scruggs, Stanley Brothers, stuff like that. But you know, so I was hearing it, and even as a little kid, loved the banjo. And I always joke that my first banjo was a skillet. There's 8 millimeter movie of me imitating Grandpa Jones. I'd have been probably 2 years old, and so I always just loved it, but never had, and when I was young, Dad bought me just an inexpensive guitar. I was probably in fourth grade, and guitar, it just hurts, kids, that's too brutal. So I just I didn't do well with it. But like the summer before high school, so right after eighth grade, ninth grade, or right before ninth grade, I started fooling with the mandolin that Dad had. It's small. I figured how hard could it be? It's little. And started messing with it, and then guitar, and then discovered that Mom had this old banjo that belonged to her mom, and nobody in her family played. At least not really. Her dad played the fiddle, but he passed away when I was young, so I never got to hear any of that. So as far as a musical family, sort of, kind of, but not really. Dad and I played a lot together when I was young. We would go and we'd play at churches and family reunions, stuff like that, but not, and then there was a couple of radio show things around that he and I would go and play on here local, but nothing super serious. But yeah, to be from a musical family, that's pretty much no. I mean, other than Dad playing guitar. And so, and he made it easy for me to have somebody to play with. So if I figured out something, then he could play guitar with me, and then, help smooth it all out and figure out, where I was screwing up. And I tell this story. I was working on a tune, Dear Old Dixie, Scruggs tune, and I was sitting in my bedroom just playing. And when you're young, you learn all these licks and these ideas and stuff that you just got to put them in the song. And I put every lick that it was in my mind in this tune. Dad walks by the room and he's like, "What are you playing?" "Dear Old Dixie." He says, "Sure doesn't sound like it." And he just kept walking. And I was like, "What do you mean doesn't sound like? You don't even play banjo." He says, "Yeah, I don't play banjo, but I know what Dear Old Dixie sounds like." And so in his own way, that was encouraging and helpful. It's just like, all right, I get it. I need to dial this back just a notch. It'd be a good idea for folks to, even folks that play music, to know what I was playing. And so I did have somebody that I could play with and bounce ideas off with. And then, wound up playing with some kids at school. So we put together a little band and all of that when I was in high school, just playing bluegrass. So
that's kind of part of, that teenage development, isn't it? To, you learn all of the flash stuff, and then
absolutely.
put it in everywhere that you possibly can and irritate the adults, and then eventually settle down.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what I did. I have, thanks to my mom, and she kept, I would just on cassette tape, I just record stuff. I'd sit and record myself practicing, or if buddies came over and we played music, I just record it. And I still have some of those tapes, and I can listen back and go, I had zero taste. It's like, how fast can we play it? And how many notes are there possible to put in this? And now it's like, all right, what can I eliminate from the song? I don't need that. I don't want that lick. I don't need that. It's just like, so definitely my taste musically has changed. It's like, how simple can we get this and it still be the song and still be interesting, and definitely a difference in how, you approach things musically from, when you're younger.
Yeah. Would you say then that you're quite a traditional bluegrass player, bluegrass banjo player? I don't know whether to say that or not. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be almost entirely true. And learning to play in the 70s, I was hearing, Newgrass Revival, Eddie Adcock, second generation. And then, you've got all of the guys like Jack Hicks, and that was playing with Monroe. And so I was hearing a lot of melodic banjo and a little more progressive stuff. But ultimately, I learned a bunch of that, and I still utilize a bunch of that. But I play bluegrass banjo. It's still very traditional. I'm not really, not creating anything extremely new. I mean, new to me, new ideas, new ways of approaching it. But when you listen to it, it's still just bluegrass banjo, or, and I play old time banjo too. I play clawhammer and some two finger and some, but but even there, it's still very traditional. People ask me all the time, what, are you listening to so-and-so? Are you listening to this? And I was like, man, I'm still stuck in Earl Scruggs. I'm still trying to figure out what Earl did. Yeah. It's like, I've barely eased over into J.D. Crowe at this point. It's like there was such a volume of work with guys like Earl and Don Reno and Ralph Stanley and those early pickers. There's just so much there, and it's easy for me to not have to worry about what the latest, newest, hottest picker is, because I mean, I like them and I love to hear it, but I don't consider myself cutting edge really. I'm way back away from the edge of the envelope. But I just like the traditional stuff for the most part. I mean, I like some new stuff as well. But if I'm going to play, it's definitely going to be traditional. And I don't know if that's, obviously, we do the things in life that we enjoy. And so obviously I do enjoy it. But listening to music, I was listening to, like getting ready this morning, I had Scott Vestal playing, I was like, okay, that's out there. I recognize that that's banjo, and that's just absolutely amazing, and I have no clue what he's doing, but I can still enjoy it. It's like, wow, that would take me the rest of the year to figure out, but I do like it. But yeah,
so where's the difference? Is it in the technique, or is it in the approach to the musical interpretation?
I think it's a little of both. I mean, Scott has and it's guys like Scott, Noam Pikelny, and some of these guys, they have such incredible technique. They have mastered, all the Scruggs stuff, all the Bill Keith melodic stuff, and then all the single string stuff. And then they find this way to blend it all together and create, almost a new sound. Whereas I guess, I wanted to say, I guess I just never put the time to figure out how to make all of that work together where these guys did. So there's the technique aspect of it. And then there's this, intellectual aspect of it too, of creating new ideas and ways of applying the stuff that I never plugged into that mindset. I mean, I sit and noodle and come up with ideas and licks, but they still sound traditional. It's just based on of, partly what I listen to. It's I, and I guess that's part of it. I have a good steady diet of traditional bluegrass music. So that's what I hear. So that's kind of what's in my head. If I were to shift that, like I did kind of in the, like in the late 80s or so, I was definitely listening to more Bela Fleck and more progressive stuff and was kind of starting to understand what was going on with that. But I feel like that was a phase, and it didn't take long for me to gravitate back to just playing just standard traditional stuff. So a lot of it's definitely diet of what you put in. I tend to, I mean, even language. So like when we first moved here, obviously I didn't sound like I was from here. We moved here from Florida. I sounded like a Floridian. But pretty soon I started to pick up the vernacular and I started to sound like the people that I was playing around. And so the same thing kind of happens in music. I've got a couple of friends that live up in Northern Ireland, and if I spend much time with them, one of the things that I find that happens to my speech is everything ends in a question. So because like my friend Mark and Rob, like that Ulster accent that they go up on the end, everything sounds like a question. And then I come home and people look at me like, is that a question or is that a statement? It's like, well, yeah, I 2 weeks in Ireland and suddenly I sound like I'm trying to pick up the accent. But I mean, it's just what you're around and you get used to it. And so part of it for me is, yeah, it is technique, but it's also just the way some of these guys approach creating music and how they've practiced creating music. And I'm still trying to create in a more traditional manner, I guess, because that's just the way my brain's wired up at this point. I started playing in 77. So 47 years later, that's hard to change.
You mentioned, I'm a flat picking 4-string player, right? Tenor player.
Right. Yeah.
All melody and highly ornate with lots of single note triplets, all done through the pick. So bearing that in mind, you mentioned 3 different types of technique earlier. You were talking about Scruggs, melodic, and single note playing. So it all sounds wonderful to me. I couldn't tell the difference from one to the other. Maybe, I mean, you even kind of suggested when you blend it all together, it sounds amazing. What's the difference between those 3 styles?
Probably easier for me to show you.
Right.
Let's see. So I'm not sure if people won't know who I am unless I lean sideways.
That's your thing, Jim. I was showing my son earlier. He's 14 and he's like, that's so cool. Maybe you should start doing that, Dad.
Whatever it takes. I've watched a handful of your videos. I love trad music, and done a couple of things. Done two band tours of Ireland. I played with Curtis Blackwell over there in 2012, and then Hamilton County Ramblers in 2016. And I'm ready to come back, but you know, you just gotta make it cost neutral at least, you know.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you know, but it's so just like Scruggs stuff. Well, let's just start with single string, and I'm terrible at it. And this is part of the reason I don't do a lot of it. But like approaching it would be like approaching it with a flat pick. And I remember I was a lot younger and was starting to do some single string stuff, and a buddy I used to play with, he walks up and he just hands me a flat pick. He says, "Here, you just might as well use that, but you use your thumb and your index." So you're playing, let's see. So, I mean, you could almost do that all with a pick. And so Don Reno does all of that. And so he will interject that into it. So like, and then melodic, you're playing a cross string. So you would play like an open string, and then you take a lower string and you fret it higher up. So that type of sound. So that's a little different. And then with the standard bluegrass sound, it's more arpeggiated. So with the single string style and the melodic style, it allows you to play more closely to the melody. So let's see something. If I and I really don't do a lot of single string stuff, but like,
there's nothing like being put on the spot.
Oh, I know, and it's all, you know. It's also 10:20 a.m. my time. This is the first time I've touched the banjo today. So there's that. So this will be really slow, but like you did a video recently of Little Beggar Man, Red Hair Boy. Okay. So from a Scruggs standpoint would be. So just really, I mean, I'm not hitting a lot of melody notes there. I'm hitting a couple, but it's still, but we're melodically, you can. So, and I don't play it melodic, but that's the way I would approach it. So I'm able to get more melody notes. And then if you could somehow blend some single string action with the index and thumb and make that all seamless, then you could suddenly, I mean, you have access to way more melody notes. So I just.
But when I watch it, it always looks like so much easier than
trying to do it with a pick.
Well, doing with a pick, but also the left hand, because like a fiddle or a mandolin. I gotta hit every single note.
Right. And so with that melodic style. So using across the strings. So yeah, your left hand doesn't work nearly as much as you have to, you know.
Yeah. And I think
but on single string, it does. And my left hand is super weak because I've never really utilized it for that, you know. And I watch the Irish trad guys play banjo. I'm going, man, that sounds so cool. I'd love to do that. And then I look at the left hand and go, nah, it's never going to happen. Too late in life to start that.
And I've been my whole life trying to play with the absolute resonance and sustain that you get from the 5-string banjo, especially when you do the melodic style,
right?
Because of course everything is resonating at the same time because you're going across 5 strings, and right. I'm here like, why doesn't it sound as sweet? And you know,
you got to find ways of playing across strings. So you know, where you're like, so I'm 7th fret. Of course, I know you're tuned in 5ths, but so you know, it's just, so you can run scales. Which is real economical.
It's so funny because I can just see your left hand. It looks like you're not doing anything, and you have this beautiful sound coming out.
Yeah, but it's all in the right hand, you know. Yeah. So you know, the right hand is moving. So you know, you've got all of that happening there. So
it's brilliant. I love this. It's the sound of the 5-string, and I don't know where I heard it, that made me want to play banjo.
Oh, really?
But I reckon I was in my 20s before I really heard any bluegrass music, because I was just, you know, all Irish, completely immersed in Irish music.
Did you go to trad school? Did you do all of that?
No, there's no such thing. No. Went to national school, or like primary level school, and got handed a penny whistle when I was 4 years old.
Right.
When I was 8, teacher came into the school, said, "Who wants to play the banjo?" And I was like, "Well, me."
Yeah.
And you know, went home and just started picking. And I think I was about 22 when I went on tour in the US for the first time. And it was with a band that had been touring for years, but they started to tour in the south of the US, which was unheard of for Irish music. So that's when I played in Chattanooga. We played in Alabama and, you know, Tennessee, where, you know, back in the early 2000s, there weren't many Irish bands touring. And every single night, there'd be 20 banjo players outside afterwards going, "What the hell are you doing with a flat pick? And how are you doing all the," you know? And I was like, I didn't even know I was doing anything different, right?
Right. We like that first time we played in Ireland in 2012, we played this place down in Dungarvan, and it's like a singers club or whatever. And there were a couple of guys that played the Irish banjo, and it was just so cool. You know, I was sitting there, it was so totally different than what and I had heard it before, but I'd never really watched it and never really sat beside somebody playing. It's like, well, it's so absolutely fascinating that, you know, one could do that. But I mean, but I kind of get it, you know. And you're playing all the same notes that the fiddler's playing. You're playing all the same notes that the accordion player's playing, or whatever. And that has a neat feel. And with the melodic style, I mean, you can kind of do that too. Do you know, you may know Tom Hanway. Do you know Tom?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And play some great Irish sounding music on his 5-string, you know. Another guy I haven't thought of in a while, and his name just came to me, Chris Grotwall. Chris is another guy that plays, you know, melodic style banjo, but he plays mostly traditional Irish style tunes with all the cool little embellishments and grace notes and all of those things, which I just barely even understand. You know, I know the words, but to be able to
yeah, Ron Block has been doing some great stuff with an Irish player called Damien O'Kane.
Oh yeah,
yeah. They have a couple of albums, and Ron is really. I've met Ron. I know him quite well, and he's a really curious kind of guy. He's this kind of big open mind to all sorts of different music, you know. So I think he gets drawn into these fun projects because he's so curious as to see, you know, can he match the Irish style with on the 5-string banjo, you know, which he does remarkably.
And while I've got the curiosity, I don't think I have the technical ability to pull it off. Yeah, I listened to stuff like Earl Scruggs Review, and this was after, you know, Lester and Earl broke up and Earl started playing with his sons, and they're doing these pop rock covers, you know, and Earl's still playing Earl Scruggs style banjo. And that's kind of where I got stuck, you know. It's like, yeah, I you know, like when I play, it's still going to be very, very traditional with just mostly Scruggs style stuff. And I envy those that really start to get a handle on it. And I've always considered myself somewhat of a slow learner. It takes me a while to finally understand enough of what I'm hearing to even be able to imitate it, much less create something in that sound.
What would you say your teaching style is, or your even your method? Like, how do you approach the idea of teaching a tune to somebody?
Yeah, that's so. I like in my lessons, obviously, I teach songs, but what I always say is I don't really teach you songs. I use tunes and songs to teach you ideas and techniques that you'll always and forever use. I mean, but like if you came and signed up for bluegrass banjo lessons, yeah, you're going to learn. I'm going to teach Cripple Creek, and we're going to pare it down into some just basic ideas, but we're not going to flesh it out. We're not going to fill it out. I just want to get some techniques under your fingers that you can start utilizing. So my approach is, I wouldn't say it was lick based, but it's definitely an approach where I'm trying to impart ideas that you can use. So let's say we learn Cripple Creek, and then we're going to take bits and pieces that I've taught you that you can play that with, and then we're going to build something else, and maybe I'll add another technique and say, okay, so if you know this, and then we learn just this one thing, now we can play this other song, or we can do this. And so I like thinking that I'm helping people build a skill set that they can utilize to play whatever song that they want to. It's like I get requests on, daily. Can you teach me such and such from this album? Can you teach me this song? And it's like, if you've been through my lessons and you did this stuff, you should be able to cobble together some version of a break to that tune. I mean, it's 2 chords, it's 3 chords, you can find it, and a lot of times I do have lessons out there on my channel that are like that, where I just go through and say, okay, we're going to learn this song. What's it sound like? Hey, that sounds like the lick out of Cripple Creek. Hey, that sounds like the lick out of Foggy Mountain Breakdown. Hey, we've done this lick before. All right, now we can build this song just using techniques that we know. So the lessons kind of work that way, in trying to help students figure out what's coming next. It's like, oh, I did this lick. Oh, I always use this lick when I need this particular sound. It's like, okay. And eventually, hopefully that sinks in and somebody can create their own break their own way and not necessarily use a tab. I don't teach with tab. I mean, I offer tabs on my lessons, like most of them. Now, my beginner series, there's no tab for any of that, because as you will probably see comments and such that I have made, is, well, when your kids are learning to talk, you don't teach them to read first. It's a good idea. Just let them talk and figure it out. And so my beginner lessons are no tab. It's just all by ear and taking the ideas and trying to just create a melody that's recognizable. But I do offer tabs on some of the later stuff. It's like, well, if you really want it, and I only recently in the past few years started doing that. 2 years ago, I went back and transcribed just about the bulk of all of my lessons. I just would take 2 or 3 songs and it's usually just one break. So 16 measures. Yeah. So I would just write that out. And so I do have tabs, but even where I sell my tabs, it's like, you don't need these. And I say that usually just go back to the video, figure it out. You don't need this tab. You can do this without the tab. But I don't teach with tabs. I'd rather just give you the general idea of where we're going. And a lot of times it's like, okay, here's your new lick. Here's your new idea. But in the meantime, while you're working on that, you can use this old idea that I know you already know that'll still fit in that same hole. So I try to, from the beginning, I'm trying to instill this idea of that you can take and create the music the way you want to create it, not necessarily the way it's, the way I played it or the way Earl played it or whoever. I feel like that it's important and in that and encouraging students to do that, I feel like it gives them the later on, it gives them the ability to just create their own breaks to stuff. I mean, because when I was learning, I didn't have a lot of tabs. I didn't have any tabs. I didn't learn to read tab until I was probably 30 years old. I started playing when I was 13. And I just, so for me, I would listen to a recording and I would hear Earl Scruggs do this lick and I'm going, I have no idea what he's doing, but I know he's going up the neck. And I say, well, I wonder how I can do that. So I know the general area where he is. And it's like, I don't know what he's doing with his right hand. I can't figure it out. I'll just do something to fit into that hole. And it's like, that's close enough. And then the more I learned, the more I was able to figure out more of what he was doing. But in the meantime, I was still playing these tunes. I have like the first little band I played with, guys would come in and say, hey, we'd like to do this song. And it's like, cool. How's it go? And then, you just kind of have to figure it out. Or they'd say, well, that's on the, it's on that Flat and Scruggs record, or that's, on Jim and Jesse album. It's like, okay, I'll go listen to it. And it's like, okay, I have no idea what the banjo player's doing here, but, I get a general idea. I know the chord changes. I know the melody will make something happen. And so that's part of what I'm trying to do with students is to get them to see how things kind of fit together and how to build stuff. And I picked up that general idea. There was this dude, Lee Elliott, and he back in the 70s, he did this book. I'm looking to see if I had it. It's not convenient, but he did this book and it didn't have a lot of tab. It had tabs for basic licks. So, okay, there's a lick, So he had some basic one measure little tabs. And then he had tabs, one measure tabs for rolls. And so you learn those. And then, but once you got into the book, he would say, all right, we're going to play a song. And it's like boiling cabbage now. And he wouldn't have a tab, but he would have a verbal recipe. So it'd be like, all right, you're going to do that alternating roll with a slide, start on your third string, slide from 2 to 4. And he said, do that twice. And then he would have a little next line would be hold a C chord, play a forward and a reverse roll, or a forward roll off the second string. All right, forward roll, second string. And so it was just a step by step taking ideas that you should have learned in the first part of the book if you go through the lessons. And then so everything was just step by step, very cookbook recipe kind of ways of doing it. And by the end of going through all of that, I started to see, all right, so Boiling Cabbage Down, he uses that Cripple Creek lick. And then in Beverly Hillbillies, he says, so you're going to do lead in number 1. And then do 2 pinches. Do 2 Cripple Creek licks. Now hold an A minor chord, and you're going to do a forward and reverse roll, and you're going to pick up your finger on the way back around. And it's like, wow, I can take bits and pieces of what I already learned how to do, and now I built yet another song. And you finally, I think at some point for me, it started to make sense that, oh wow, I can do this, and I can take bits and pieces of what I know and turn them into full-blown songs. And so like in my beginner series, what do I cover in my beginner series? I cover alternating roll, how to do slides, hammers, and pull-offs. I don't even cover any bends in that first 10 lessons, but in those first 10 lessons, you learn 3 or 4 right hand patterns. You learn slide, hammer, pull-offs, and a couple of chords. If you never learned another thing, you should be able to take all of that and turn it into something that sounds recognizable. It may not be the most creative thing, but then again, if you go to your local jam session or whatever, or you're playing at church or wherever you're playing, you should be able to put together something that sounds close enough to the tune that folks will hear it and go, oh yeah, that's what that is. And so just using basic stuff. And even when I was doing private lessons, that was also what I was trying, that's what I would try to do with my private students. I teach them some things, and then we take what they already knew and just add a little bit to it later. And hopefully they figure out how to turn that into their own way of creating arrangements. And some get it and some struggle. Yeah. You teach. So, but but it was always my goal when I'm teaching, to teach concepts over tunes and memorization. I want students to know that this lick is not just Cripple Creek lick. It's not an island. That is useful everywhere. I want to take those pieces that you've learned and hopefully you can categorize them in your brain somehow, that you can pull them out and use them wherever you need them. And to be able to, you basically building a vocabulary, I guess, and it's not just licks, but it's just ideas of how to find the melody that you're looking for. It's like, and it's like if I'm like in the key G, if a song starts on the B, so like Boiling Cabbage Down starts on the B. So that's there. What's a bluegrassy way to get to that sound? I could just play a forward roll there if I wanted to. And make that somewhat basic, but you have, and there's not a thing in the world wrong with that. So now we've got us a simple break the Boiling Cabbage Down. But we can also use techniques we've learned from other songs. So we can take little ideas that we've learned and create embellishments that makes it fancier or cooler or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily make it better. It just makes it different. And so that's something that I also try to encourage students. Just don't worry about what's best, what's right, what's, you know, just play what sounds good and play what you like. And then, because some things may not sound good to you right off the bat. There's some licks that might sound odd to your ear when you're just starting out. So play things that work. I remember trying to work out Cripple Creek off of Earl Scruggs, the Foggy Mountain Banjo album. So he's playing Cripple Creek, and there's just, and it's simple stuff now, but I mean, I was only playing for a few months at the time, and I was like, well, dadgummit, every time he goes to this spot, I just can't do that lick. What am I going to do? And it's like, well, I know it goes to a C chord here. Where am I? And can I just make something up on the spot? And so I did. I just, and where Earl goes. And for the life of me, I was having trouble figuring out that I could go. And as simple as that is now, for me then, it was like, that makes no sense. I have no idea what he's doing. But I knew I knew that was a C, because I had figured that out pretty quick. I got a G, C, D. I thought, well, I can just play everything with a bar chord. And so that's what I did. So I just found another way that just made more sense to me, to get mostly the same notes. So, so which leads me to the other thing that I try to get my students to do is just experiment. One of the things that I do with my students, once they start to move a little bit and learn a couple of songs, it's like, okay, Cripple Creek sounds great, man. You're killing it. That's awesome. Play it for me, but don't use an alternating roll pattern. And they'll be like, wait, how do you play Cripple Creek without alternating roll? I said, well, that's the question. How are you going to do that? So go home and figure that out. That's your homework, to figure out how to play this song. If suddenly you forgot how to do an alternating roll, how are you going to play that? And if they go home and work on that and try to figure that out, and whether they have, whatever degree of success it is, suddenly they start figuring out, it's like, oh, wow, I could do this instead. It still fills the same gap. And we, so we learn a little improvisation. I don't know, that's a word. And, they learn a little of that, as well as learning to, try to be creative within a framework. It's just like, yeah, you can do any lick you want to, except this one. And like, I'll teach a basic little fill-in lick that you've heard thousands of times. And so that becomes the one little tag lick people will use in breaks. So it's there. And so the question comes up, I'll say, that's great. It's a cool lick. Don't ever play that lick again. Find another lick to go in that hole. And just force the students to come up with their own lick to fit that. And then, so they come in the next week and they'll have something, good, bad, indifferent, doesn't matter. If it works, it works. And then we can build on that and say, okay, you figured that out. What if you did this with it? And then give them ideas to try, and just to continually build on this vocabulary, bag of licks, bag of tricks. And And I assume it's got to be the same for the traditional Irish banjo. There's probably techniques that you use. Well, I know you're using pull-offs, hammer-on slides, those types of things in everything that you play. But there's also probably melodic devices that you use that are everywhere. It's like, oh, that does this. We're running this scale here, or we're doing this partial scale. I mean, like in bluegrass or in the fiddle tunes, you hear that little tag at the end, and that's. I mean, you could put it in everything. It's like, I did a little tribute recently to all the U.S. Armed Forces and playing all of their Armed Forces musical themes like Anchors Away, Wild Blue Yonder, all of these tunes. And part of the puzzle for me is try not to use that same lick in every song, because they all follow kind of theme. And so finding different ways to do those. And but also recognizing that, oh, I use that same idea in Library Blossom. I can probably use that same lick in Bill Cheatham, and it may actually work in other tunes. And so, but that's part of how I'm trying to teach is everything. Like even on my YouTube channel, and part of the reason that I struggle sometimes to put out what I'm going to teach next, it's not a matter of me not having a song in mind. I mean, that never ends. But what can I teach that's going to build on what I've already put out there? And I've got over 500 videos. It gets complicated. It's like, what new idea can I teach in this tune and then use ideas that we've already got. So that can be somewhat of that's a challenge. That's one of the content creation challenges, but I am trying to give more concepts, fundamentals, things that students can use. And yeah, I might teach you how to play Bill Cheatham, but the things that you learn in Bill Cheatham are not just isolated to that tune. I mean, they work everywhere. I heard this lick and I can't even, I've been working on it for 6 months now, and it may never go into the regular vocabulary. And I learned it for a particular tune. And right now, over the past couple of days, I'm starting to figure out where I can use it other places. But whether or not I will ever be able to utilize it at its full potential, I don't know. It sounded cool when I heard it, but now it's like, maybe I don't, but again, like a student that I am still, I am trying to figure out where it can be best utilized. And it's one of those licks that integrates the single style stuff, the melodic stuff, and the aspect of Scruggs, and it's all kind of blended together. And it's so way far out of my comfort zone. And I'm just trying to figure it out, and it's, I'm not quite sure, how to make it any better than what it is, but it's, it's coming together.
This has been a really inspiring conversation for me, because we don't think in terms of licks in Irish music. So we think in terms of a tune, and the tune it was written by somebody, and it's full of notes.
Right.
Right. And
you can play all of them.
And you play all of them, and then you embellish it by adding in ornaments.
Right.
Always staying true-ish to the tune. So I've done 2 videos over the years, and I've called it a bag of licks. And Irish people don't even know what a lick is, but you've explained it beautifully in this. Without I was going to ask, and then you just did it, and it's fabulous. But it's given me a real boost of inspiration just in my own lessons to try and dial in a little bit in terms of, I suppose, when I do the most ornate version of a tune. So I'll here's the basic melody that you should know because somebody wrote it or it's been around for
Right.
this long. And we'll go with single ornaments, and then we'll do more and we get to this one at the end, and it's got blah, 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 and it's got all of the stuff and the slides and the hammer-ons and all of that. I never think of those as repeatable moments, repeatable licks that can be lifted and put into other places. So it's given me great food for thought for how to break that down into a better teaching module for somebody, rather than, hey, look what I could do.
Yeah.
Here's the
Right.
tab in case you can't figure it out.
Well, for me, it's like, all right. Yeah, I guess for me, I approach it very vocabulary, language based, lick based, because, all right, my son is in the military, he's in the Air Force, and he is in Spain. And I like to visit. And so a couple of years ago, I started trying to learn a little bit of Spanish, and my vocabulary in Spanish is terrible. I can order food. I can rent a car. I can do basic stuff. But I can still communicate. I may not use the word that would be optimal, but I can come up with something. And it's like, little kids don't have great vocabularies, but they can communicate big ideas with little vocabularies. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping that, this approach takes is I may not have the same vocabulary that Earl Scruggs had, and definitely don't have the vocabulary that Noam Pikelny or Bela Fleck has, or Scott Vestal. But I should still be able to tell you the same story. I can tell you the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and it may not be like the story you read in the storybook, but I can still impart that idea. And that's what I'm trying to do. Now, I totally get in a lot of traditional tunes, especially Irish tunes and a lot of fiddle tunes, if you stray very far from that written story, you're going to get the side eye from different folks. It's like, well, what's he doing? That's not the tune.
It's my entire life. That's my entire life story right there.
Well, so the first trip to Ireland we went, and I'm trying to remember where it was, but we had gone to this jam somewhere, and it was mostly a bluegrass jam ish. There is a bluegrass scene in Ireland. Mm-hmm. I had no clue until I went. But then we played later that evening, it kind of evolved into a bunch of the guys just playing some Irish tunes as well. And they're like, what tunes do y'all know that we know? And it's like, well, how about St. Anne's Reel? And it's like, okay, cool. And then so we kick off into this, and it's like, no, that's not the way we play it. It's just like, oh, okay. But the chord structure was the same, but there was definitely a different approach to the tune. And it was amusing and fun. And and things like in bluegrass, one of the things that I noticed is like where, as a bluegrass player, I would feel the music, I would feel this certain way or this particular vibe or this part of the tune really needs to have some drive here or whatever. The Irish players, it was all in a different place. Even like when somebody would vocally, like, yeah, or whatever, that was a cool lick. It was never in the spot that I was expecting it. It was always somewhere else. And it's like, and then so I would start to listen, and it's like, okay, what did they just hear that I totally missed? So even the way that the music is consumed felt different as well. But, but still, in listening to it and listening to different folks play, the whole time we were there, uh, there there were things that I heard that were common to every song. You know, there were common licks and ideas and things that were used. And, and yeah, you know, your Bag of Licks video speaks to us bluegrass players, because now it makes a little more sense. It's like, oh, that's handy. Could use that to play the song, or not. But yeah, it's like, for me, being locked into playing a certain melody every time would be very problematic for me. You know, I I have so many live recordings of different banjo players, Earl, JD, all of these guys that I tried to listen to, Ralph Stanley. And, you know, you listen to these live shows where it's basically the same show, but it was done at a later date. And the banjo players play it differently every time. And I assume that happens to a certain degree in Irish, but maybe not as much.
Probably, yeah, the improvisation is not to the same extent, but
Right.
in a very subtle way, it's really unusual for a good player to play. Like, so we could play a tune 4 times and play 4 tunes in a row, right, and put them all together. Very few musicians of note, you know, would play the tune the same way 4 times in a row. They would play 4 different versions of the tune, but the changes are subtle, and it's got to do with the ornamentation, the busyness of that, you know, the dynamic changes, longer notes, chords, the way that you. So yeah, and I'm a huge exponent to that. I can't play I don't think I've ever played a tune the same way twice, even if I played the same tune 100 times.
Right.
Because I'm constantly trying to find different ways of interpreting it.
I'm trying to remember where we were, but we met some guys and that were playing, and there was a fiddle player and an accordion player, and they would do these things in the songs that they were playing that were just note for note the whole way through, you know. And it's like, just to be able to memorize that many notes in a row was just, and to be able to make all of that happen. I felt pretty impressed by the whole ordeal, you know, because, but there was, and I say that, but I mean, there's things that happen like that in some of the bluegrass groups that I play with. You know, this part of the tune, we are going to do harmony parts, or we're going to play this in unison. We're going to play these notes together, and you just sit and you work them out. So I guess really not that unusual, but it seemed pretty dang impressive when I'm sitting here, you know, watching it going, oh, wow. That's how do they memorize all that? But I mean, you just do. I mean, it's not like.
Yeah, I think probably what's most impressive, you know, to a lot of the students that I teach is that you can have, you know, 11, 12 musicians all playing a tune at the same time, and they all have slightly different versions of it. And so if you're a student and you've learned St. Anne's Reel in a very specific way, and then you sit into a session, and that session has a slightly different version of it, you know, that's a skill that they need to learn, which is to confidently play along, knowing that they're actually doing the right tune.
Right.
And that everybody is playing it slightly differently all at the same time, and it all just kind of meshes together, which is one of the beauties of Irish music, for sure.
You know, and maybe that's true there as well as here, but like different areas will play tunes differently. So when, you know, one tune comes to mind that I've played with a couple of different groups is Big Scioto, and it's just a fiddle tune. And in the B part, or the high part of the tune, there's choices, and some folks, you know, will go to the 6 minor. They'll go from 4 to 6 minor, where others go from 6 minor to 4, and you just have to know Well, you can either know going in when that's going to happen. You could ask, or or you just find out, where it's going to go. And then there's a couple of old time jams. Some tunes, they're crooked tunes, and sometimes they're crooked in different spots, or sometimes, and you don't know until you get there. And that's usually regional. That's this area. Oh yeah, we're going over here. Those tunes are going to be this certain way. And you kind of get an idea, but not always. Sometimes it's just best to ask, but so I assume that exists there as well. So it's not, so
Yeah.
that those are kind of regional things, but but yeah, for a student that, like, if I taught you a big Sciota and, well, if I taught you that, I'm going to show you that, it can go one way, it can go one of two ways depending on who's playing it. But if you only learned it one way and you got somewhere and it was different, then that's when I start getting questions on my YouTube channel. It's like, well, so-and-so plays it like this, which is the right way? And it's like, well, I don't know. It just depends on who you're playing it with. If you're playing it with him, the right way would be the way he does it. If you're playing it with me, then the right way is going to be this other way. It's never, I guess there's, it's so. And so part of what I'm trying to do when I'm teaching is trying to set students up for that very scenario, that if they've got techniques, vocabulary, ideas that they can use, then if the music changes from what they're familiar with, they should still be able to survive that jam session or that new arrangement or whatever without without having to go home and relearn everything from note one. There's like, oh, this only changes here. Okay. How can I make that happen differently? What do I need to do? Oh, it goes here first. Okay. I can do that, and just use an idea that they already have, but that's definitely not something that, yeah, I mean, it's definitely part of the design of how I teach. I want, at the very least, students to be somewhat flexible on how things work. And, it's like, here's a lick, you can use this one, or you can use that one, or you can make up something on your own. It's just got to fit in this spot. And I'll say that a lot of times in my lessons. It's like, look, right here, you're going to do a standard, just bluegrass G lick. And they're like, oh, which one? And it's like, pick one. It doesn't matter. You got a whole measure here of nothing but licks, of nothing but G. It's not part of the melody. You're just trying to fill a spot. It's not integral to the tune. It can be anything you want. If you just had to, you could just sit and not play that measure at all, and it would be all right. But figure out something to go there. And so, yeah, just slowly, but finding out how to take those ideas and just be flexible, and I think ultimately, well, it's like a conversation, music is conversation, neither of us have anything memorized that we're saying here. We're just saying stuff, and music can and probably ought to be more like that, where you're just playing, oh, this is the tune about such and such. People ask me all the time, how do you memorize so many tunes? And I really don't. I don't have tunes memorized. I kind of know how tunes go. I kind of know how the general gist of this tune. And I'm just going to tell you that story of that tune, however it comes out today. It's like I would tell you the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I mean, I can change it up, and because I don't necessarily have it word for word memorized, but I do know the story. And the same with tunes. I know how the tune goes. I can figure out a way to play it and tell you that story.
Wonderful. Jim, people can find you on YouTube, Jim Pankey, Wild Jimbo on Instagram. You got a Patreon. Your website is jimpanky.com.
That's exactly. Yeah, they can find everything at jimpanky.com.
Yeah, this has been a really inspiring conversation. For me as a teacher, you're clearly extremely passionate about teaching, which I think is fantastic. Clearly care about your students and what you're trying to pass on.
Yeah, I hope folks, when they that's the goal is, I want folks to learn to play. I would hope my students always take away from it just the ability that they can do it their way, however they want to do it, and use the ideas that I'm sharing with them if they want, or find other ideas. But it's just but that's the goal. Is I want them to be. People often come to me and say, "Man, I want to learn to play this song. This is my ultimate goal as a banjo student. I want to be able to do this song." And I try to nudge them into, you don't necessarily want to play a song. What my goal for you is, I want you to be able to play the banjo, and then you can play any song that you want to, because your taste may change a year from now, and it might, you may not want to ever play that song again. And so hopefully, my goal as a teacher is to help folks learn to play the banjo, not to play songs, and be able to play whatever they want. If they want to play traditional bluegrass, they can. If they want to, play punk rock, they can do that too. Just take the ideas and build it into something. So that's my goal as a teacher.
Brilliant. Jim, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed talking to you. I'd love to meet you sometime. If you're ever in Galway, in Ireland, come to Galway, and we can pick some tunes.
Definitely enjoyed Galway. The first time we played Ireland, we played at the Crane there in Galway, which was, we were supposed to play 2 sets, but we didn't get a break because it was so full and they wouldn't let us off stage. So, so we just played 2 sets back to back. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful town. Got to walk around there a little bit. It was great. And then, so we left, and I remember when we left Galway, we went to Inisheer, and,
very nice. Very nice.
I didn't want to leave Inisheer. I really, really
yeah, well, go out there in January and you'll have a different perspective. But
I'm sure, I'm sure
most people that go there on a sunny day don't want to leave it because it's wonderful. It's very simple and beautiful. Yeah,
I could tell that it would be a very, very cold place to be in the winter. So,
yeah. Amazing. Listen, thank you so much for your time, Jim. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right, man.
Have a great day.